Lab Coats, the podcast that undresses scientists. I'm Elodie Chabrol and I can't wait to take you with me to meet the humans behind the research. We will of course talk a little bit about science, but we will mostly talk about them. Hi everyone, welcome to a new episode, finally a new episode of Under the Lab Coat. Today I have the great pleasure to have Nicol Birsa with me. He's a neuroscientist at UCL in London. Hi Nicol.
Hello.
It's really nice to have you because we've been friends for a long time, and actually today, so if you hear background noises like birds, we are actually recording from my garden on a very, very sunny day. It's 30 degrees outside. I can't believe it. In the UK, it's amazing. Thank you for agreeing to do it.
Yes.
So we're going to start by getting the science out of the way. So I said you're a neuroscientist, but can you tell us a bit more? What are you doing? What kind of projects are you working on? So we're putting the lab coat on, and then you're going to tell us if you have a lab coat or not.
Oh, out. Right. So yeah, I'm a neuroscientist, and I work on a disease called motor neuron disease.
Yeah.
And you might have heard of this. You remember when there was the ice bucket challenge?
Yes.
Around the world. Yeah. So this is a disease. So normally, when
motor neuron disease.
Motor neuron disease, yes. And this is when normally when we want to move any muscles, we have our brain cells that tell the muscle, now you're going to move.
Yeah.
Now in motor neuron disease, the cells that make the muscles move, they start not to be very happy and eventually die. And so we're trying to find out, why they die and if we can help them being alive for longer or maybe rescue some of their functionality. So that's what I do in science.
This is cool. This is a very nice summary. Yeah, it's motor neurons because it's the neurons that help moving.
They basically tell, our muscles throughout our body, now you do this, now you do that. You can, now you move your tongue and you speak. Now you move your mouth and you eat or you breathe or you run.
You hold the microphone.
You hold the microphone. She just told me how I have to hold the microphone. I'm trying to do this. I'm not sure I'm good at this.
No, your motor neurons are doing perfectly.
They're doing the job for now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Perfect. Okay.
Yeah. So that's the disease. Yeah. And then you have the connection between your brain cells and the muscles that they start not functioning very well and eventually coming off. And we're trying to understand why it happens and if we can, make our best to make them either be informed again or make them, function a bit better. That's the purpose of what I'm doing.
So do you have the diseases? It's called motor neuron disease, but you have names because the ice bucket, was it ALS? No, it's different.
Well, actually, they have different names depending on where you live.
Okay.
In the UK, it's called motor neuron disease or ALS, amyotrophic lateral sclerosis.
Yeah.
In the US, it's called Lou Gehrig disease.
Okay.
It depends, it depends how people in different countries have
described it,
been knowing it. Well, Lou Gehrig was someone famous with the disease.
Okay.
So I normally call it motor neuron disease to, audiences that are not scientists because that's what it is. Your motor neurons are not functioning. Generally, I would call it ALS or amyotrophic lateral sclerosis. But that's a mouthful sometimes. So
yeah. Okay. And motor neuron is more I
think people can picture better what one is talking about.
So that was science. It's out of the way. The question is, my traditional question is, do you wear a lab coat in the lab?
So who's going to listen to this? No, most of the times I don't. However, sometimes when I do some specific things, then I would. Whether they're more I really, not that I really care about what I'm doing. I always care about what I'm doing, but some things are more, you
have to be kind of sterile.
They have to be cleaner, or maybe you're using something that you don't want on your clothes. I mean, you never want something on your clothes, but there's some things that are okay and some others that you want to be very careful. So if I have to be very careful or I have some, very precious samples, then I would wear it.
Yeah.
It's gone missing lately, I will add.
You're mostly on your computer lately, right?
I would say it's maybe 60-40.
Yeah.
And of the 40 I'm in the lab, a lot of the time I spend it with students. So it's changed over the years, right? Career-wise. I used to be in the lab the whole time and hardly see my computer. And then now I do a lot more work on the computer, sometimes it's just analysis that I did before as well. But now it's a lot of other things I do and I train the students. And now I think it's become more you really try to tell them what you're trying to look for, not know what they're doing, but the bigger picture, and you try to give that bigger picture a bit of a focus quite often actually with the students, so that they, then they have ideas maybe you should do this and maybe you should do that. But it's kind of so there's a lot of chatting, scientific chatting that goes on, and that of course it can be at the bench or it can be at the desk. The bench is in the lab, the desk is in the office. So you do a bit of both.
Okay. Good. So we have the science out of the way. We know that you don't always wear a lab coat, and it's nice because I think I'm always asking this question because it feels like when you say scientist to anyone that is not in science, people are going to think old dude with grey hair. This is the first thing. So it's nice to have women talking. And also a lab coat. This is the first thing. And
well, I mean, I must say, at least over the years, things have changed. But like now, we should be wearing a laptop, and I don't often do it. But sometimes I know what I'm doing, and it's like, this is fine. But then I shouldn't really, let's see who listens to this. They're going to tell me off.
No, but that's fine. That's fine. How did you end up doing research? Because it's a very specific field. Did little Nicol want to do research?
Little Nicol did not even know what research was.
Yeah. Okay.
Little Nicol wanted to own a flower shop.
Oh, nice.
And sell flowers and sell plants. And that's, that was like, some people want to be an astronaut and do the science. I didn't.
Okay. We're going to talk about plants later because I thought you still love them.
Astronauts, no.
Yeah, no astronauts, no plants. Okay, so you wanted a flower shop.
Yeah.
Nice.
That was like, job dream 1.
Yeah.
And then I'm not sure I had a job dream 2. Then I just, was growing up and like, being happy with life. I didn't have specific plans.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever considered science in the sense that I don't come from an academic family whatsoever, and science was never a thing. Like, it wasn't a thing in my upbringing. It wasn't really a thing at school necessarily. It wasn't a focus. No, it wasn't a thing. It wasn't a focus at school. I did, like, the way it works, I'm from Italy.
Yeah.
And the way it works, we have elementary school and then something like middle school that you're not specialized. And then high school, you can choose what is your
specialty.
Yeah, sort of. Like, it's still quite broad. So at the time I chose languages because I like languages. I like speaking English. At the time I even was speaking French. Don't test me on that. And so at high school I did languages and I studied French and Spanish and English. But it started to become quite clear that biology was very interesting.
Okay, yeah.
And to me, it just made sense. It's one of these things. I loved history. I loved many things at school.
Yeah.
But biology made sense. It wasn't hard for me. Like, for me, it was like a story. Like, someone would tell me, it made sense, and I knew it.
I think biology is the science that is the closest to like literature and everything because it's the one where you have to understand, you have words, you're writing things, it feels like less like mathematics than some other
But there's logic
science.
into it as well.
Yeah.
Like, it wasn't like, if they tell you, oh, this does that, and so it's needed for this, it's like, oh yeah, of course.
Yeah.
And so I started to really like it.
Okay.
And I think it was odd because, like, I think no one at school even realized that. When I did my exam at the end of school, like, my teachers were like, oh, so what are you going to do at uni? And I was like, well, at the time, actually, I wasn't sure. I was thinking in between architecture and biology, which is
very different.
Yeah, one would say. And my biology teacher was like, oh, really? Because at the time, we only did 1 year per scientific subject. Because, again, it was a language school. So it was like language high school. And so we had 1 year of chemistry, 1 year of biology, 1 year of astronomy, I think. And so I think the last year was in biology. And she was very surprised, like, oh, really?
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, I liked it.
It is nice. So then it means, so I have 2 questions. It means that you can do high school, like language high school, and still do biology.
So, well, it's called the Lyceum. So it's very broad. We had Latin, we had maths, we had physics, again, was 1 year. But yeah, you can get in uni in any faculty, really. Like, in Italy, it's not, you don't have to do science, or you don't, like, you can go, you can choose in the end.
It's nice because in France, if you do literature, it's going to be very hard then to go to biology.
It's very common in Italy. If you do what we call classical, and it's Greek and Latin, there's quite a bit of maths there. There's more maths than what I had. Okay. It's very typical to go to do medicine.
Okay.
I guess it's different.
Yeah.
They say the classical one is the one you can go anywhere, but I didn't really like the idea of doing a lot of Latin and Greek, and so I did not. But mostly I like languages, so that's why I ended up going there.
And what made you pick biology over architecture?
Am I really going to say this?
Yes.
Right. This is when I get in trouble. Not all faculties in it, or it depends, it's by university. Mm-hmm. But in my university at the time, you had an exam to get into architecture and you didn't have an exam to go to biology. I have to say, though, that this is not quite the final reason. However, it ends up being that they set the exam for architecture right when I was on my... After high school, you often do a trip with all your classmates. Yeah. And it was bang in the week of that exam. Now... that didn't make me do the final decision.
Yeah.
I decided that before, but I
It
guess, you know, it's not that I say, oh, I'll try it anyway. I was like, oh, well, that was the right decision then.
Okay. No, but it's interesting because, you know, often people think that scientists are almost like born scientists. You know, they see
No,
like
to me, it was more of a, you know,
slow
a
road.
slow process.
Yeah, but it's good because that's also why I do this podcast, because some people are like, oh, you know, even when I say I discovered research in master and before I didn't know it even existed, some people think that, oh, you watch a documentary when you're like 6 years old and then you become obsessed with biology and you want to be a biologist, and it's not always the case.
Well,
Some
but
people,
also that depends on your upbringing, right?
exactly. But yeah, so it's interesting to see that, you know, you can make choices sometimes out of like what's convenient.
But also what life brings you, right?
Yeah.
What happens in life and
Yeah.
how things happen, really.
Okay, so then you started uni, biology.
Yes. And I was the only person probably that had, you know, the least background in everything. I didn't know so much about any of that. And it was
Okay.
like, it was interesting.
So it was hard at the beginning?
Actually, no, it was
Okay.
fine. But people were like a bit shocked, like, what do you mean? You haven't done, you know, 5 years of physics? And it's like, I don't know. But then again, for me, I had some of the teachers were very good. Some other were average. But to me, everything was very logical, apart from organic chemistry. That I suffered.
Oh yeah, but chemistry, so yeah.
Chemistry,
Okay,
I
but
liked.
organic
Inorganic
chemistry.
chemistry, I liked. Organic chemistry, I suffered. I
It's a
remember
lot
that.
of by heart,
It's
knowing
a
lots
lot
of
of
things.
so I'm not good at by heart,
Yeah.
remembering things by heart. I'm good at you know, you tell me the story and I can, you know, that story comes back to me.
Yeah, definitely biology is a lot of storytelling.
Yeah.
It's quite nice.
Yeah.
Okay, so then you entered biology. Well, so at that time, what did you want to do after that? Did you think far, or did you just think, I like biology, I'm going to do that, and let's see where...
I think
brings.
again it changed over the years. So in Italy we have, like in the UK now, well everywhere I guess, is 3 years of undergrad, and that undergrad was cellular molecular biology.
Okay.
And it became the first year, actually the first years were shared between cellular molecular biology and I guess marine biology, other types of biology.
Nice.
And so I had, for example, botanics.
Oh, yeah.
I really loved it. I don't think I ever want to kind of specialize in that.
Yeah.
But again, I found it so easy. It was great. And I could see all the plants. Like, oh, this is what's happening.
So you wanted to have a flower shop.
Do you think something is coming back there?
Yeah, like, did you
But I
want
never
to do
wanted-
botanic biology?
No, for some reason, no. But I
Okay.
liked it.
Okay.
I liked it, and also I remember we had this laboratory where it was ridiculous. We had to, some people hated it and I loved it. You had to cut plants of
Yeah.
sorts, like either plants or like fruits or something, and then look at that microscope and draw them.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I had that as well.
I loved it. But I also like, I'm not that good at drawing, but I like it.
Yeah.
And so, you know, to me that was like amazing. No, so I never went back to the botanic side of things.
Okay.
It wasn't something that I felt in terms, like it wasn't career then, but it was like scientific interest. It's
Okay.
not that where I was standing.
Okay.
Then we had all sorts of like different things. Now I don't remember exactly, but so I remember what happened then. In the third year of uni, so the last year undergrad, we had this professor of physiology.
Yeah.
So it turns out he was a UCL.
Okay.
And at the time, he overlapped with Bernard Katz, which you would know maybe. Some of the audience, well, this is one of the greatest neuroscientists, and like, you know, action potential and how neurons work and all of that.
Okay.
And just the way he explained things was amazing. I remember once there was this class where he was telling us about senses, but he started class by reading Proust
Okay.
and the Petite Madeleine.
Yeah. Okay.
And I was
That
like,
was nice. Okay.
yeah, and I was like, because I was like, you're bringing together everything I like.
Yeah.
Like, that's the way I like. That's the sort of storytelling that
Yeah.
I just find it so fascinating. And he's the reason why I went into neuroscience and physiology, because I just
Nice.
loved, he was so good at explaining everything. And I just loved all of that. And it made everything so exciting and so interesting. So I always find neuroscience so interesting. But I don't know whether it's because I found someone who was very great at teaching it.
Yeah.
You know, why I never went into cancer biology or into other types of biology,
Yeah.
why, you know, other cells are interesting, right? It's not like neurons are great, I love them. But, you know, there's a lot of other cells that are interesting. I just never got interested into them. And maybe because I never had someone inspiring me so much about them.
This is nice.
That's how I got there. And then my master's was in neuroscience, because that's the one he was leading at the time.
And then you discovered the research.
It was kind of at the same time, because for our undergrad we have to do it's not an internship, it's like kind of a 3-month thesis sort of thing.
Okay.
And then I knew, throughout I knew about research because all of our professors were also having a lab.
Researchers, yeah.
And then there was this person called Laura Ballerini, and she just came back, I think, from the UK.
Yeah.
And she was working again on neurons. And she was looking at how neurons took to each other in early development when they're growing. And there's something like calcium, the ion calcium, that goes up in a cell and then the other. And the synchrony with how, this goes up and goes down and how other cells communicate, that's what she was focusing on. And so I started doing lab, and you could see that for the first time I saw a living neuron.
Yeah. Under a microscope.
No, even having some signal, it was alive and it was signaling.
Yeah.
And that was mind-blowing to me.
Okay. So it's like, okay, this is what I want to do. You're in love with neurons. This is nice.
I do like neurons.
So then you decided to do a PhD.
At that point, it was master.
Yeah.
I still had to do a master, and then the master was in neuroscience because this was just before. And for the back then, I wanted to be an electrophysiologist. I want to see this electrical activity between neurons. It was so fascinating. A lot of our professors were really focused on that, and so I think again, the ones that I was most inspired by, they were doing that. So that's what I wanted to do.
Okay.
The time I had to do a thesis in my master, that was a whole year of research.
Yeah.
And then I went to this professor that was doing, this electrophysiology. And I went to his I would like to work in your lab and I would like to do this. And it's like, that's impossible.
Why?
You can't do this in a master's. It's too short. That's not something we do. And I was like, okay, fine. And then it's like, but if you want, you can work with this other part of the team on the molecular and cellular biology. I was like, okay, maybe. He was very convincing that you're never going to be able to achieve it. That is not true, by the way. People can do that in a master's. But at the time, I was like, okay.
Was it an ambitious project?
He felt it was too ambitious to learn how to do electrophysiology within a year.
Okay.
Having seen, there's people that have done it, it would have been totally possible. Maybe with other people. But he was very convincing. It's like, there's all these other interesting things are happening. And I was like, okay, I can learn that. Because I don't think in my master it was very focused on the actual cellular biology. I think or maybe the people that weren't doing as in an inspiring way. I don't know. I was like, okay, I'll try. And then there was this senior postdoc, and she was so inspiring again. She was so excited about anything. She's like, oh, Nicole, can you see? We can do all of these things, and we can, if we think this is the case, we can do all these experiments. And that was, again, something very inspiring for me. So again, that's when I switched again. Okay. And I was like, oh, I actually like this stuff.
For people that are not used to biology, and because biology is a very huge field, neuroscience is a subdomain of biology, but then again, you have tons of different domains. So we talk about cellular biology. Basically, cellular is looking at cells and understanding how they work.
And looking how they work inside.
And molecular is even more zooming in the cells and looking at the molecules inside the cells. And electrophysiology is poking cells with needles and recording the electric currents and trying to understand how they communicate, because in the brain they communicate with electricity. So it was just a little reminder in case
the little legend.
Exactly, in case, because then it's really interesting, because those are really different domains, so it feels like everything is neuroscience, but when you dig in neuroscience you have tons of different things. So you have to pick, for your project, and also it means different techniques to learn. Some techniques are quite tricky, so electrophysiology, it felt you couldn't learn it. But so that's why when you know some kind of biology and you have to switch to another one, it means learning new techniques. So that's why.
And some are easier to learn in the short term than others.
Exactly. And to be honest, electrophysiology, this was the last thing I learned. And for me, I think it was too much physics involved.
So I had all that training at the time, so I think I would have been able to pick it up. I have to say though, during my PhD, so we're jumping forward for a bit, I did this course actually in Bordeaux. We had to spend 1 week in three different labs doing different types of neuroscience. And one was electrophysiology. Finally, I get to see it in first person. And I was like, this is hard.
Yeah, it's really hard. It's for me, it's the least biology of the biology, because it's very physics, lots of currents. It really feels like physics than storytelling and biology. For me, that's the one that broke my brain, because I was trying and I was like, I'm a good biologist, but I'm really, really bad electrophysiologist. And for me, listening to electrophysiologists talking, it was just like, this is physics, this is not biology, and physics is breaking my brain. So it's interesting to see that it's not because you're a biologist that you're good in every biology.
No, absolutely.
You have students listening in high school, and they like some stuff in biology, but they are not good in physics. Yeah, go for it. You can still do things. It's not because you're bad in one science domain that you're not going to do a career in
and
science.
I think I want to highlight it really depends on people you come across. Like, people can make something that is very complicated and difficult very easy and understandable. It's not just luck, it's like, a mix of things. Like, that's how, when it's like how you're formed. It's like, well, you're formed by all these people that have been very inspiring to you. And, everyone puts in something, and then, it's like making a cake. At the end, what comes out is like a mix of all the ingredients.
Yeah, this is nice. So you're almost ready cake. So then you did, we're making your cake. So then you did a PhD.
Yes.
Was it in Italy?
It was in the UK.
It was in the UK. So why did you move to the UK?
So this is when, I finished my master's. I worked in the lab for another year there as a research tech.
Yeah.
Because I couldn't quite make up my mind.
Okay.
Like, I want to do a PhD, that I was sure. Where do I want to do this PhD is not as sure. And what am I going to do in this PhD? That's not sure either. So there's this European Federation for Neuroscience, and they have a job market. So they put all the PhDs there. So I started looking, and at some point, like, some things came up, and it was in Sweden. I was like, will I go to Sweden? It's like light and dark. I'm not sure.
It's very different from Italy. Yeah,
very different. And if you were like, are you sure? It's like, I don't know, I might try apply. And I can't remember now if I've applied. Maybe I didn't apply in the end. I wasn't sure. But I always liked, so we go back to languages, right? I always liked English, and I always wanted to be more exposed to English. Yeah. And as much as you can be exposed to English in other countries where, in Germany, say.
It's broken English in the labs because you're like speaking with so many people.
Well, I was already in an international lab in Italy where we spoke half English, half Italian, mostly English with anyone who wouldn't speak Italian, but it's a bit of a mix, right? Yeah. So I kind of wanted to be 100% exposed to English. So England was always somewhere that I would have liked to go, but at the time I was still looking at other places as well. And I was looking at places that seemed interesting to me, like, in terms of projects and everything. And so I did a few applications in the UK, and I remember I got a few of them, but I wasn't too convinced about the projects or the labs or the environment. So it's like, I'm not going to just go for something I'm not 100% convinced. It's like, okay, fine. And then, like, a year went by, and I was like, you know what? By the time, I might as well get a PhD in Italy. I've worked for like a year and a half now on some projects. Like, people at the same stage as me are getting a PhD in a year's time. It's like, maybe I should just do it here. But there was this last project I saw on the job market that was in London in the UK, and it was like about mitochondria. Mitochondria is this like organelles in cells that give you energy, give the cell energy, not just you energy. And so, the cells need energy to do anything, and that's what it was about. And I was like, oh, that looks interesting. It's like, I'll apply. And then I haven't heard back for a few months. It's like, whatever, it's gone. And then I hear back, and I was like, oh yeah, actually I'm really interested in your, CV and something. Would you like to have a chat? And I was like, a chat? Someone who wants to talk to me on the phone whilst I'm in the lab. It's like, how's that going to happen?
Yeah.
And so Joseph Kittler was my PhD supervisor. I got the position in the end, and he just rang me. And I was like shocked because, you have to, when you're in Italy, like before moving to the UK, it's not that easy to just speak in another language. And I was like terrified. And, he seemed very nice. He's like, oh, do you want to come over to give an interview here? And I was like, okay. And I was going on holiday, and I was like, by the way, could you, instead of the flight back to Italy, could you pay me the flight to Dublin? Because I'm about to go to Dublin. It's like, okay, it's cheaper, I promise. So I went, and I gave this talk, and it was, I don't know, that I remember the day very well. It was a very nice day. Everyone was so friendly and nice. Like, he was really nice. I got along with him. The whole lab was nice. He took me out for Indian. I also remember no one gave me water, and I was so thirsty. I was too shy to ask for water. And so and then a few days back, he called me. He's like, well, you're in if you want it. And I was like, okay, cool. I'm coming. So 3 weeks later, I think I moved. That was a short, like, people in Italy was like, what do you mean you're leaving?
I'm going. Bye.
See ya. And so that's how
you ended up, because it's been 14 years you're in the UK now.
Yep.
So you did a PhD and postdocs.
Yeah.
And now you are actually a PI, right?
Well, I'm
principal investigator.
Independent researcher.
Okay, so you're an independent researcher.
I'm a researcher. Is in that time that you're like, you're independent, you're asking for money, you're doing the experiments. Yeah. So you're at this stage where you're actually doing everything is, it's an interesting time. There's some, headaches about it, but it's also, it's always fun.
So, and you kept on the same subject the whole time? Or?
No. So during my PhD was about these organelles that give energy to the cells, and at the end of my PhD I started being interesting. I was like, when you don't have energy, the energy is needed, but also neurons have to, there's some sort of building blocks, some proteins that neurons have to make to, be alive, to function, to do anything. You know, there's a stimulus, like something happens and they have to respond and they have to make these building blocks, these proteins. And I started to think it's like it would be interesting to understand how this happens, where there's a connection between the neuron, the other neuron, the muscle, whatever the other cell is. And so I knew I wanted to kind of start going that way.
Okay.
And at the time I finished my PhD, this position came up, and it was again at UCL, but in a different institute.
Yeah.
And it was about working on motor neuron disease, because motor neuron disease is also caused by mutations in proteins that are important for this, to making these building blocks. And it's weird, right, how things align in life sometimes. And it was precisely the type of project that I would have been looking for.
Yeah.
And I wasn't sure at the time if I want to move to the UK or not. Like, it was a kind of a complicated time for many things. And this project came out. It was exactly the thing I want to work on. And the person, like the lab head, was someone I've never heard about. And it turns out it was a clinical person.
So it's a medic, basically.
Yeah, it's a medic. If you're a medic, the things work a bit differently in career advances.
Yeah, you can do research.
Like you can become a doctor, like a medic, like you can visit patient, everything, and then do a PhD and start your lab. And so that's what just happened. So he had a lot of papers on, like, you know, like his research was like a bit varied on things. But that's when he first got his big money, and that's where he was starting his lab. But it was in collaboration with someone else, GP Schiavo, who I knew from years, and actually I was wanting to apply for a PhD at the time back in the days, that was doing something that was very close to what I liked. So I was like, I'm gonna try.
Yeah.
And so I tried, and I did the interview, and I got it, and that's how I started in motor neuron disease and like looking at these proteins in the connection between neurons and muscle.
It's really nice. So basically, your story is a story of inspiration and a bit of luck with like having the right project.
Yeah, I think it's like how things change in life, and like how you know, it's like, oh, okay, so this is what I like now, let's go forward this way.
And I think with research also, you don't always know fields, so you're kind of discovering fields in uni.
As you go.
You discover as you go. So it's really hard to think, you know, it's a lot of pressure on high school kids to decide, oh, I want to be whatever. And because especially with research, sometimes there are fields that you discover later. And then you're like, oh, I want to do that. And it's quite interesting, especially with biology. I feel like, you know, biology is so big that you're like, oh, I like biology. And then you discover the whole range of like fields and different subjects you can learn. And it goes from actually like botany, like doing plants, to doing human stuff, to doing like working on diseases, working on like so many different parts of the body. Or it could be animal biology. It could be like marine biology, so many different things. That it's quite interesting, because in high school you call it biology, but then
it's everything.
As you develop, sometimes you're finding out new domains and new things.
No,
and
absolutely, and new things change, like the techniques and the technology changes, and as that changes, you go back to questions you had 10 years before. And you can answer them. It's quite
it is interesting. Now I want to go more into what are you doing outside of the lab, because the lab is taking a lot of time. So right now we're in the garden in the sun, but you have hobbies, right? And I think one comes back to little Nicol.
I think so. You haven't seen my flat lately, but I may have more plants than I should, maybe. I tend to, you know, they just grow, and then they make, you know, new plants, and there's many of them. There's, you know, especially with pandemic. I think pandemic made it worse, because I was like, there's nothing I can do in the lab. I can't go to lab for 3 months. What am I going to do? Just plant every seed I find and see what happens. I had little experiments going on there. Yeah,
so it's like having experiments, but home experiments that smell good.
And they see them change, and like I even had, I mean, this is not going to be interesting for people, I guess. I even had this one plant that normally is just leaves, right? Yeah. And it has flowered. And turns out they only flower, I think, in Central America or something. Yeah. I have no idea what I've done, but it was pandemic, and I was like, you know, being very nice to the plant, and talking to the plant, I guess. Also, your flat was quite humid, and they loved it. So it wasn't so good for humans, but very good for plants.
But you told me just before we started the podcast that you also had like it was quite cute. Like you bought seeds for like chives and that kind of thing,
chamomile and like everything. Yeah.
And you were like, seeds are funnier because you can see them grow. So it's really
there's still a scientist at heart. Yeah. I love witnessing, and how does it change? It's like, what if I do this? What if I do that? If I move it a little bit, is it going to be different?
So what are the favorite plants you have? Is it the thing you eat? Is it the flowers? Is it just like pretty leaves?
That's an interesting question. You know, it's more interesting than you think, I think. Yeah. Because I like funky plants. Like I don't like roses so much. Like I don't like the classical plants. Like they're pretty, but you know, they don't give me
same
funkiness.
Yeah.
What do I have at the minute? Well, the pilea is the one that has flowered. And actually, you know what? Oh, God. Not only has flowered, because I was there. I was during a call in pandemic, and this happened, and they do something called pollen puffs.
Oh, yeah,
and I saw it. Yeah. I saw it, and I was like, what on earth is that? And then I had to Google it, and I saw it on videos in Central America or something.
So
and
it's
I was like
releasing some kind of
but it was like I have videos, like I was in a call and I just put the camera off and I have to record this. It's like this puffs of pollen that goes madness, complete madness. Sorry, I lost track of that.
So question was, really weird plants you like.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know. I can't really name others because I don't know names. I know some names, but I forget them. Anything that looks a bit
weird,
different and funky, that's the one I would take.
This is nice. For me it's more like I'm not really good with plants, so if I can keep some alive, it's definitely the ones that I'm gonna have.
Give you food.
So tomatoes, I have lots in the garden, or stuff like mint.
Herbs.
And
so
herbs.
I have those too.
Yeah.
But funny leaves, dotty leaves, something weird.
Nice.
They're my favorite.
Nice. When you're not gardening, what else are you doing?
What else do I do? I like going for walks and stuff. I would always love a road trip.
Yeah.
A day trip. I like seeing the sea or bodies of water in general.
Yeah.
I come from the seaside, so I do. Like in London, you have the Thames, and that gives me a sense of water.
Where are you from?
Trieste. Trieste is northeast of Italy. The eastern you can go on the north coast.
Okay.
And then, Italians sometimes forget we're still in Italy, but we are. 10 minutes. 10 minutes we're in Slovenia. So just on the seaside.
Yeah.
To me, going to the sea in Italy is like 10 minutes from home, wherever you are. Like by well, not necessarily beach sea.
Yeah.
But
city
center.
center.
City center is on the sea.
Really?
Yeah.
I don't know why I was imagining Trieste deep in the middle, but no, actually.
No.
Okay.
So
sea is quite calming, soothing.
Going to the seaside, even in this country, and you should know because you made me swim in this country.
Yes.
I think it was the second time in my life, and now I can actually do it. I feel like I'm one of those people that do it.
Yeah, because in the UK the weather is quite cold. So.
Well, that day I remember it being windy and not sunny. We were like, it's not that bad. It's like, okay, that's challenge accepted.
And you swam. It was nice actually.
Yeah, no, now as I said, now I do it. That's the thing. I feel like I can do it.
What I really like when you go swimming in whatever waters, it could be a lake, it could be sea, is that you have a different perception. For example, when I did a road trip in Norway, I was dipping in every fjord I could find, because then I would swim. It was cold. It was 12 degrees. And I'm not that brave.
Yeah, I swam, I went into the water in Norway because you instilled this in me, but it was just from the sauna to that, so it was a bit different.
But it's nice, and for me it's about going in the middle of the fjord and having a landscape that you wouldn't have if you're staying in the land. So that's why I love that.
Stay alive by that distance.
Yeah. Well, 12 degrees is okay. 20, 50. Yeah, as soon as you move. So don't do that if you're not a good swimmer and you're not used to open water swimming, because this is the scariest thing is that you cannot walk. So if you're not a good swimmer, there is nothing, you cannot rest. So you have to be good at open water. We're arriving to the end of this podcast. Really, thank you, Nicol. I love this discussion, especially we've been friends for years and I feel like I'm still learning things about you. So I love it. And I didn't ask too much because I knew I would record the podcast, and I'm trying not to know before because then my reactions, it's more spontaneous. So I'm I don't want to know because
don't tell me. Think about these things, but don't tell them.
Yeah, exactly. So we're arriving at the end of this episode, and what I'm usually asking is, do you have something that we didn't talk about or something that we talked about quickly and you want to come back on, something to close the episode that you would like really to say?
Well, something we talked about it, but something it's what we said, right? To me, there's been some people in my life that's been very inspiring, and they've been when I was studying, they've been in the lab, even peers and people that were just a step above me, and they have been so much inspirational. That's what I liked, but also that's what I try to give back. I love teaching students. I love teaching students when they like to be taught, but in general, I like telling them stories, and there's some people like that. So some people like reading, papers and stuff, but I always like to give that back. And you can tell people, actually, most of the students, I think all of the students I had stayed in academia. That could be a good thing or a bad thing. We can discuss that another time. But it means they had a good time. And I think that to me is quite important, because I was inspired by so many people. Yeah. That's why to me that's really important.
Okay, so this is good. Try to inspire with
it's not the most rewarding job in terms of money.
No.
So it has to be rewarding in other ways, and like that it is for me.
This is nice. Cool. I love finishing on that. Thank you, Nicol. I will put in the description all the places so we can reach you on Twitter,
Yes,
LinkedIn.
all of them.
Okay, so I will put the links. Don't hesitate if you have question to connect with
Find
Nicol.
me.
And
I'm here.
find her, ask her question, get inspired. Thank you very much. Thank you to everyone that is listening, and see you at the next episode.
Bye.
Bye. That's it for this episode of Under the Lab Coat. I hope you enjoyed it. Don't hesitate to rate the podcast on the platforms, to share it around, and to subscribe. Thank you.